EdTech Mondays Africa is supported by the Mastercard Foundation's Center for Innovative Teaching and Learning and is part of the Mastercard Foundation's Young Africa Works programming.
Hello and welcome to this edition of EdTech Mondays Africa. My name is Joy Doreen Bira and we're coming to you from what is commonly known and referred to as Sub-Saharan Africa's Silicon Valley, and that is Kenya's capital, Nairobi. And in this special edition, we are talking about EdTech in Africa, the reflections, the achievements, as well as the future. Now here on EdTech Mondays this season, we have focused on mainstreaming hybrid models of learning and how exactly we can incorporate that in transforming education across the continent. A 2022 report by Britta Bridges indicates that there are over 500 EdTech startups on the continent, and a World Bank report also shows that there are slightly over 600 technology hubs across the continent. How do we take advantage of these technology innovations and innovators to transform the education system across the continent? Educational technology incorporates ICTs into the education curriculum, improving the pedagogy approaches and also making sure that Africa is not only just using technologies for education, but making it accessible and relevant for all to access. And so we've got panelists from across the African continent who are going to help us break down some of these reflections, the achievements, and the work that still needs to be done to transform Africa's education ecosystem. Join me in studio as we talk to these panelists and get to hear from them on what exactly has been achieved. And joining us to have this conversation on this edition of EdTech Mondays Africa, where we are reflecting on the achievements as well as what the future holds for us here in terms of the EdTech space in Africa. We're joined by a number of panelists from our EdTech Mondays country edition countries. We have Dan Ngabonziza, who is the director for Kigali Today Radio, and he's joining us from Rwanda's capital, Kigali. We have Abdallah Sseruwagi, who is the EdTech Lab lead at the Innovation Village in Uganda. We also have Chinyelu Akpa, who is the education practice lead at Relearn Co-creation Hub in Nigeria. And of course, we do have Femi Adewumi, who is the programs director at MEST, that is joining us from Ghana's capital, Accra. And in studio with us, we do have Oloo, who is the program coordinator at EdTech East Africa here in Kenya. And also we do have Tesfaye, who is the CEO and founder of SHEGA in Ethiopia. So Chinyelu, I'm going to start with you. In regard to observations from your country, please tell us what has stood out in the EdTech landscape in Nigeria.
So for us here in Nigeria, the biggest and most noticeable thing is that a lot more EdTech startups are beginning to get visibility. There's so much conversation and interest. People who ordinarily wouldn't have wanted to have anything to do with EdTech are now increasingly inquisitive, wanting to know how they can incorporate technology into their practices, primarily because we now understand that learning can happen out of the walls of the classroom. Like learning knows no barriers or frontiers anymore. So you're seeing schools, even down to the low-cost schools, looking for ways to strike partnerships and deals with these EdTech startups and saying, how can we come about a pricing model that would fit the unique needs of my school, or how much we are able to make? There's the bit around the government engagement and interest. Nigeria at this point just have a new government that had come in, and there's been so much advancement both in the Ministry of Information and the Ministry of Science and Technology, Communications, Digital Economy. There have been a lot of policies that are now being enacted. Currently, I'm at a workshop in Abuja, and they are supporting EdTech startups, saying, what is your problem? How can we work with you? How can we collaborate?
Great, thank you. Thank you for that. Femi, what are your thoughts around the EdTech space in Ghana?
One of the biggest things we've seen this year is the government engagement. we had our EdTech Stakeholder Forum in August, where the government was massively represented. We had the Minister for Education, we had the Director of the Ghana Education Service, we had the Director also of the Center for Distance Learning and Open Schooling in Ghana, all attend. And the discussions were really robust. We learned a lot about what the government was already looking into and doing on around getting technology adopted in the education in Ghana. And 2 weeks after our event, there was actually an event held by SENDLOS also. And SENDLOS is the government leading EdTech adoption in Ghana. And they held a similar event to ours, really well attended by government people, all discussing education and technology. So this, I think, is probably the biggest thing we're seeing in Ghana.
Dan, what has stood out in the EdTech space in Rwanda?
I'll take you back to 2020 when almost the entire East African, the African region was into total lockdown. And students were back home, easily breathing the life they were not expecting to happen. And there came EdTech Monday program. This was a game changer, I must say, in 2020. EdTech Monday came at the right time because the schools had closed and, people were being enlightened on how they can virtually keep learning. And EdTech Monday was one of the crucial components that helped people, particularly students and the teaching staff in Rwanda to, adapt quickly and get out of the COVID-19 effects and stress it was causing. So since we started hosting EdTech Mondays on KT Radio, we have brought together several stakeholders in the sector. That's the Ministry of ICT, the IT companies coming together to discuss policies in place, make sure that the government can, work with stakeholders in ensuring that EdTech Monday ecosystem is a success across the country.
Great, thank you. And Abdallah, I want to hear your thoughts as well from the Ugandan perspective.
Specifically, we've seen the launch of Uganda's digital transformation roadmap, which is a 5-year plan that covers from 2023 to 2027. So this one mainly will focus on skills development, digital services, cybersecurity, innovation, and entrepreneurship, and also creating enabling environment and infrastructure. So we are looking at the government coming up full force to try and help the adoption of EdTech by laying infrastructures, like enabling the laying of fiber optic cables up to like at least the last mile to enable adoption of some of these technologies in EdTech.
Allow me now to come to our panelists who are with us in studio today. Aggie, what are some of the issues that stood out in the EdTech space in Kenya?
I would say like one of the things that has been very prominent from the EdTech East Africa side is seeing that the EdTech ecosystem is actually an ecosystem now. That the players in this space are working together. We are collaborating. We are seeing people inquiring about like, I want to work with this person and I want to work with this media company and I want to work with the government on this thing. So there's a lot of conversations that's happening, whereas previously there was a lot of siloed conversations. Now we are having a lot more collaboration, which makes for an ecosystem. And more notably, this year on EdTech Mondays, we had an episode that we filmed at an event that was hosted by the Nairobi County government. So we are seeing the government as an ecosystem player also getting involved in these conversations. And a lot of the events that they are hosting have EdTech tracks, where previously it was only education. They're also saying, oh, EdTech is a thing now. And when we host events, whereas FinTech had taken the lead on all of the different tracks, now they're making room and space for EdTech, for conversations around technology for education, and really focusing on that and giving that room and space. So that's a highlight from this year. But also that I think the biggest thing that has been a win is that the ecosystem is working and talking to each other.
And I think that's really important because once we get the ecosystems working and talking to each other, there's so much that can be achieved. Anthony?
I think one of the very important learning that we realized in Ethiopia especially even before we started EdTech Mondays, the understanding that we had was, there wasn't a lot of EdTech entrepreneurs in Ethiopia. The sector didn't really have a lot of startups that we are building. As about the engagement and the activities that happened over the last 1 year, we realized there's more to the sector than we've thought. There were a lot of companies, but they were building independently. And as my colleague mentioned, for example, for Kenya, the ecosystem is coming, but for us, we were thinking that even the entrepreneurs didn't really exist, right? So now we found a lot of entrepreneurs that were building a lot of startups around EdTech solutions, building tools and projectors. So I think that's also a very big win, which is obviously a similar trend we're seeing across some of these key markets, but that's also part of it.
Right. And so from what I'm picking, or from what I gather from this conversation that we're having, is that there's so much synergy that is happening. And I really want to know more in terms of the evidence. Is there any evidence of partnerships that we are seeing as a result of the EdTech Mondays conversations that we've had? If you may, Anthony, probably you can kick us off with this one.
After we realized there were EdTech entrepreneurs building solutions for the market, one thing that came out as a solution to address some of the challenges the sector is having. These challenges were raised as a part of a conversation we're having with EdTech radio platform, as well as the overall EdTech conversation. We realized there is a community that needs to be in place to really voice everyone's concern and together. And we recently launched an EdTech Ethiopia community initiative, which was one key output as a part of this growing ecosystem. And we're actually today at the same time, there's a session going on in Ethiopia where we invited a government representative to describe what the policy about for other tech entrepreneurs in one place. So I think that's a very good evidence for what's being evolving.
Okay, great. Agi, you want to share some of those with us?
I think for us, one of the key things that EdTech Mondays has helped accelerate is the inclusion of the voices of teachers into the conversation that's going on. Whereas previously we didn't have teachers engaged in platforms such as EdTech Mondays, where they get to share their learnings in the classroom, very practical day-to-day lives, what they're doing in their classrooms to change the lives of the learners. It has been very impactful because we are seeing entrepreneurs coming on board and talking to teachers, even in the design process, saying, okay, what would be helpful in your classroom? What would help make your life easier, the process of learning better and more engaging for learners? What can I include in my product that would be helpful? And it's all as a result of creating this space and saying that the voices of teachers is very needed and very necessary in these conversations, and we cannot exclude them. And so I think one of the biggest things that we are seeing as being very impactful is that there's so much more inclusion, and not just within the capital city, Nairobi, that we are going outside of Nairobi and having a more countrywide perspective from teachers.
Chinyelu, if you might share your learnings with us.
I might say that the biggest takeaway for us here in Nigeria has been the tilt to learning outcomes. So more than before, people are asking beyond technology, beyond just providing devices, how can EdTech help learners achieve better learning outcomes? People are coming down to have conversations and saying, I don't want to see your beautiful product. I don't want to know what your UI UX design is. I don't want to have laptops and tablets everywhere. How can we help students get better learning outcomes by virtue of what we are designing, by virtue of the products, resources, content, and everything? That has been the biggest takeaway for us here in Nigeria.
Femi, as we even talk about the partnerships that are currently happening, maybe you can tie that to what you expected to see more of, but you're not really seeing that. And hopefully we can start to work on that even going forward.
For what we saw, EdTech startups were building products, but there didn't seem to be a lot of engagement with the ultimate users of the engagement, like the government, like the teachers. And one of the things that we took away as an action was, how do we get more engagement with government, with parents? And in our future programming, actually, we have this built into our programming about the engagement. So it's great to hear Agi saying that this is one of the things that they they are looking at. So definitely we need a lot more engagement with the end users, parents, the learners themselves, and the teachers.
All right. And speaking of adoption, Dan, I want to come to you as well. What do you think the focus should be in terms of transforming education technology around Africa from a Rwandan perspective? Where should we put more focus?
I'll first give a recap of what has been happening as an impact of EdTech Monday sessions, especially on our platform. First, we have realized that EdTech Monday has brought partnership in a way that there is government coming together, tech companies coming together, entrepreneurs, startups, all those three classes coming together to discuss exactly what the ICT in schools should be like. Now, as we speak, there is an ongoing, very big debate across students from the University of Rwanda. That's a national higher institution of learning, which combines 8 public institutions of higher learning. Students are complaining and giving views on how, the policy on distribution of laptops in public schools should be done. And this has greatly been part of, the engagements teachers and students across the country have had through EdTech Monday session. This is a very good take-home point from what has been happening. And I must say, if I look at an African perspective, EdTech Monday should put more emphasis on, going down in these schools, going down in these startups, and, bringing together policymakers to come and discuss the way forward.
All right. Abdallah, I want to hear your thoughts on this.
On the African continent, I believe coming from Uganda, if the teacher has been empowered on how to first integrate EdTech in the classroom, and then second, use it as a tool to propagate education, then from there we could look at a bigger impact than what's currently happening. So for me, in the nutshell, I believe once we take EdTech to the teachers, empower teachers on how to utilize these EdTech tools and how to formally integrate EdTech, because it's been a big problem that most of the teachers do not know actually how to integrate technology effectively in the classroom. They can use these technologies, but how to integrate them into the normal classroom is still a problem. So I believe that if focus is put on the teachers and the learners on how to utilize these technologies, then we could have a bigger impact.
Thank you. And so here on EdTech Mondays throughout this season, we have focused mainly on mainstreaming hybrid models of learning across the education ecosystem. But then how is that working in terms of, are we seeing conversations beyond EdTech Mondays evolving into dialogue that then leads to certain decisions being made? I want to hear the thoughts of our panelists as well. And I guess I should start with Agi on this one. Agi, are we seeing more dialogue happening now? And what does that dialogue look like as we head into the future?
Yes, I think there's definitely more dialogue. As we talk, as I have mentioned, that the ecosystem is actually now starting to function more as an ecosystem, which means the different parts of it are talking to each other, the different stakeholders are talking to each other, which is great. But we are also seeing a lot of ecosystem strengthening initiatives across the board, from development partners, including Mastercard Foundation, creating programs like the accelerator programs that are empowering startups to create products that will actually create change. And in that process, we are bringing in teachers and talking to teachers, having startups talk to teachers, talk to learners, talk to parents, depending on who your target group is. One of the things we are pushing for as EdTech East Africa, and thankful for the support of Mastercard Foundation, is that we want to take these conversations outside of Nairobi, because there's a very big population of learners and teachers and parents outside of Nairobi who are interested in having these conversations, who are interested in getting products that work for their context. If there's no light or power, what are we doing about that? Can they use solar power and equipment and appliances, those kinds of things? So I think contextualization of these conversations is happening. We are taking the conversation outside of the capital city into other parts of the country. We are trying to get a more national-wide perspective on the state of EdTech at the moment, and that's a win. So conversations are happening, and I'm so grateful that they're happening outside of, our primary operations center, which is Nairobi.
Right. In the interest of time, Antone, I want to hear your thoughts around Ethiopia's EdTech ecosystem or EdTech landscape. There's so much work that can be done in Ethiopia, given the different dynamics of what's happening there currently. So what do you think the government needs to do more of in terms of making sure that we are transforming and integrating ICT in our education systems?
The obvious starting point is how do you enable or create a better enabling environment where innovators can tap in and deliver these solutions. And the unique thing with EdTech by nature is oftentimes government is a significant as a buyer or user of these solutions, as the government is quite highly involved in delivery of education. So definitely enabling environment, recognition and providing the support. I think that's very critical. But the second important thing is oftentimes there's a tendency, even if when government is adopting these technologies, to go outside and buy it, while there's local solutions, local entrepreneurs that are often building customized solution. And that comes again by, if you're not looking inside and if you're not creating the ecosystem, then you don't have the tools and the channels to use these solutions. So I think government definitely should look for those solutions, locally, and then see how that can get adopted, and that's very critical.
Okay, great. And so as we look into the future, I believe that there are certain things that we want to achieve and make sure that we are driving and championing in terms of education technology across Africa, with a key goal of ensuring access to quality and relevant education across the continent. Abdallah, I want to hear your thoughts around this one. Where do you think we need to go in the future, not just on EdTech Mondays, but generally in the EdTech ecospace?
Beginning with the EdTech Monday show, it would be very good if we evolve into a more encompassing platform that is multifaceted in terms of intervention, education intervention, and technology. I feel we could have more intentional events, like, for example, the EdTech Summit that is happening in Western Kenya. But again, bring in key stakeholders like policymakers, teachers, and the students into these conversations, and let their voices be heard, so that there could be proper policies that are drafted and implemented to guide the EdTech implementation in Africa. So for me, in a nutshell, I believe what could work in the future would depend mostly on changing the mindsets and also affecting policy through making voices of the key end users heard.
Okay, great. Dan, as we reimagine EdTech and look into newer technologies as well that are emerging, like artificial intelligence or generative AI and adaptive AI in the EdTech space, what more do you think we need to look forward to in the future in the EdTech space?
Africa is regarded as the youngest continent, and we know that. If you take a case of Rwanda, 75% of the 13 million population are below the age of 30. So you can just imagine the biggest percentage of the population is these young people who are students, I must say, who are these young men and women coming up with startups.
How do you think we can contextualize the future, given all of those existing, I wouldn't call them challenges, but probably setbacks? With all those existing, how do we still move the needle in the right direction?
So in the theory of adoption, one of the very first things to consider is how to create a relative advantage between the new innovation we're trying to adopt versus the old way we've been doing things. And once we see an advantage, we will make the move to adopt, even if it means learning new ways. People learn new ways of doing things all the time. So we need to just continue the conversations, and bring the conversations to the local context, like my colleagues on the panel have said. We need to bring that conversation down to them. We need to make it experiential as well. I like the idea of taking EdTech Mondays out of the studio, as mentioned in Rwanda, taking it to where the people actually are and engaging with them. We say it's a platform now, platform for conversation and engagement. So the way to just move that adoption and bridge a gap is take the discussion, take the engagement down to the people who are going to be using it.
I love that. Take the conversation down to the ground. So, of course, as we are looking into the future, we did speak to the director of the Center for Innovative Teaching and Learning, Joseph Nsengimana, who is with the Mastercard Foundation. And we also did speak to Suraj Shah, who is the lead for strategic partnerships at the Center for Innovative Teaching and Learning at the Mastercard Foundation, and just pick their brains on what exactly we should look forward to in the future with the EdTech landscape across Africa, and how do we transform it and build an impactful ecosystem across Africa. All right, gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us on this special edition of EdTech Mondays Africa. I guess the question I would like to start with is, this entire year, EdTech Mondays has had a huge focus on mainstreaming hybrid models of learning. What was the thinking behind this?
I mean, if you think back at the beginning of the year, we're just coming out of the COVID-19 pandemic. So if we learn anything, was the fact that our education systems need to be more robust, more resistant to shock. Millions of young people were out of school and they could not continue to learn. So we want to make sure that that doesn't repeat itself. And the only way to prevent this is by creating means by which you can learn while at school, but you can also learn when you're not at school. Let's not confine the learning into a building. And we need hybrid system of learning in order to accomplish this.
Okay. Suraj?
The time to act is now. Should we wait for another shock into the system to find out, how we'll extend learning when classrooms are closed? And the way he said it is, not only when classrooms are closed, but if you look at the countries across Africa, there are thousands and thousands of learners who still can't access formal learning. But also then as you peel the layers, I think we'll need to start working. We have started working with governments who have understood this. And the first point of view is, how do we get policy to address this? The second one will be, what is that kind of technology and what kind of methodologies and what resources will we have to put in place to implement hybrid models of learning? So that's an ongoing conversation that we've started to have with governments across Africa.
Great. I'm interested to know, what are some of the learnings really in the wider EdTech ecosystem that we can carry over the last couple of years in trying to build an impactful EdTech ecosystem? Suraj?
Even with policies in place, as I said, what is out there, what is available, given various, I wouldn't say barriers, but there are constraints. Infrastructure and access to infrastructure is one big one. Are the teachers, digitally literate, or do they have the capacity to deliver hybrid models of learning? So understanding, but there are EdTech solutions that actually do overcome some of these challenges. Low threshold technology-based EdTech solutions that empower teachers to become, better equipped to train, teach with remote learning, etc. So it's bringing all of those people together in one ecosystem, understanding who's doing what can we learn from. That seems to be working. And we've started to see a lot of partnerships being, fostered through our EdTech Mondays platform, where people are learning, this is something I can do. Or the policymakers understanding this is a wide variety of solutions we had never considered. So these can be mainstreamed into the education, ministries of education, pedagogy systems.
Just to add a few things to what Suraj said, one of the reasons we focus on local EdTech companies is that these companies are designing for the reality they live in, right? And so they tend to be more cognizant of this reality. So we have solutions now that use low bandwidth, that use not only internet, but also feature phones because this was designed by local entrepreneurs who understand the reality we live in. And so with this kind of new innovation coming up, the reach or the use of EdTech is actually expanding. We're seeing more school use it. We're seeing more learner use it. And in so doing, we are also seeing that the political machinery or the policies is forced to deal with it. And EdTech Monday actually contribute to this because we're giving voice to the people to actually discuss, ask questions. And so it's a combination of the two. You bring together the ecosystem, they start to talk to each other. You expand the innovation so that more people have access to it. And that's gonna, we're gonna sort of like work both ways to make sure that more innovations are being created, but also there is an enabling ecosystem that allows them to flourish. And I think that's sort of the goal.
And so 2024, according to the African Union, is the year of education. Are there particulars we should expect on the EdTech Mondays platform as we also seek to play a role in ensuring that there is access to quality and relevant education in Africa?
Absolutely. So there are a number of things we need to do in 2024. One is that this program has been around for a few years now, right? We've had conversation around EdTech. We've engaged the policymaker, policy implementers. We've engaged learners, teachers, parents. But now we need to ask ourselves, what's next, right? What's next? How do we close the loop? How do we ensure that some of the suggestion or some of the feedback that were actually voiced through this program are actually being implemented? So we want to make sure that we ride on top of this year of education to ensure that really the voice of the young people, the voice of the parents is being listened to, and we are implementing those suggestions as a consequence of that. The second thing is that, as we continue to support young people, young entrepreneurs, young EdTech entrepreneurs, we will have more of them. So far, we've supported 48 companies. By the end of this year, we'll have 48 companies who have gone through the program, the Mastercard Foundation EdTech Fellowship. Next year, we'll have an additional 96. So we are having quite a number of these companies. How do we connect them? How do we connect them so that they can collaborate and build even better product? How do we connect them to their respective policymakers? In addition to the data issue, right? Of course, there is always the data issue to deal with. So I would see that EdTech Monday is going to start incorporating some of those data discussion in the year 2024.
I'd just like to add to what Joseph said. What he said was, we've been doing this program for 3 years, and we've seen it evolve from on-the-air episodes to actually becoming a channel of communication, for like stakeholder input into development of policies. But we already started seeing that, for example, in Ethiopia this year. We're seeing that as a channel of direct communication with the government, as we saw in Ghana when they had the first, EdTech stakeholders forum in the country, and this is on the backbone of EdTech Mondays. And so now 2024 is really the year to make all of those connections come together. We've got a program with the World Bank where we're supporting countries mainstream the hybrid models of learning. There are 2 or 3 more countries that will be reviewing now the policy. So this is where we see the EdTech Mondays come in play to get all the feedback, get all the stakeholder input, get all their buy-in towards that the policy actually will, make learning more accessible, more relevant, more quality into the hands of our learners. So definitely taking part in the year of education and putting EdTech Mondays to the forefront to hear what people want to say and get it to be a channel to get everybody to hear it.
What are some of those issues that we can expect during the conversations in the coming seasons or coming conversations on EdTech Mondays?
So as we said, hybrid model will now need to be unpacked. Where is the policy at in each of those countries? Are they conducive to hybrid models? Do they need to be modified or new policies created? And that itself is a big process. Think through what is available and what can be gotten, and how will we get them? How do we have the resources? Do we have the capacity build for it? And what are the people saying? So that will be one thing. The other one is infrastructure. How much does how do we bring together the government's power of creating infrastructure with other private sector like telcos, etc., to avail and make infrastructure and connectivity, etc., more accessible? So those are some of the conversations we'll have. And of course, there's always the question of, are our teachers ready? What can we do? Who needs to come to the table to discuss the capacity building of teachers, etc.? If some of these are in place, so there's structures in place, the capacity building, the policy enabling it, then EdTech, through fellowship, through the very entrepreneurial mind of our EdTech, local EdTech entrepreneurs, will start falling into place, and I think there'll be a better uptake of EdTech.
Okay. Joseph, we're going into WAEMO as well with EdTech Mondays, tapping into the Francophone market. What do you visualize from WAEMO region?
We're entering this region. It's the first time. It is a different culture, different language. It's going to be a new experience. But I think that we're going to build this on top of what we've learned in the last 3 years, right? Making sure that it's more than just a discussion. We built wraparound programs that they can take and actually be able to move faster than we did, in the other countries. So that's how we're looking at it. That's how we're planning. We're kicking it off, for instance, with a report. We commissioned the report that looked at the EdTech ecosystem in the entire region. So we are going to have this discussion with the stakeholders.
Great. And just listening to Joseph Nsengimana, the Director for Center for Innovative Teaching and Learning at the Mastercard Foundation, and Suraj Shah, who is the lead for strategic partnerships at the Center for Innovative Teaching and Learning at the Mastercard Foundation, does paint the picture of a lot more work needs to be done. But no doubt we are on the right track with EdTech innovations, and also pointing out the Mastercard Foundation EdTech Fellowship that is transforming the lives of EdTech startups across the African continent. More and more of that, and the solutions that are being locally designed to speak to improving the challenges that are on the African continent. And so let me come back to my panelists here to get their parting shots in regard to the reflections, the achievements, and also the future as we look to transform the EdTech ecospace in Africa. Femi, let me start with you for purposes of closing the show this year.
So in Ghana, we actually are putting together a white paper following our research on EdTech in the ecosystem in Ghana. And 2-3 things are coming out. One is ecosystem, which has already been mentioned. There are so many stakeholders doing different things around EdTech adoption, but there's not that cohesive approach to it. And we need to make this conversation an ecosystem conversation. So this is the first thing. And just like we've said, we need to bring everybody into the conversation and take the conversation to the people who will be using it, the parents, the learners, and especially the teachers and the administrators.
The fundamental thing was pushing EdTech is we always have to really go to the core of it, which is really improving the day-to-day experience of students and teachers and parents that are engaging. So as we move forward, the one thing that's very critical is how do we go to the basic of it? How do we improve the basics? Oftentimes when we say technology, it looks like it's very big, wide, sophisticated, but we want to make sure we go to the basics and really communicate to the whole ecosystem, to users and students and teachers, what is really improving, and then really focusing on pushing the critical boundaries. So I think that's very important, and that's something we're pushing in Ethiopia as well as a part of the conversation, that we're not lost in just bigger thoughts and ideas, but are actually improving. And I think that's very critical in terms of even pushing adoption. When we're focusing on critical, pain points, it's even easier for users to adopt it because we're solving fundamental problems. And some of the use cases are actually worked even in Ethiopia. and the EdTech solution that have been adopted more shows that they were targeting much more key pain points. And I think it's very important to really bring down to the basics. I know as my colleagues mentioned, in terms of engagement, but also in terms of actual adoption and then usage.
Aggie, your thoughts?
As we move forward, one of the interesting things is that we always say at EdTech East Africa is that there's such a buy-in in education across the continent. Parents, teachers know that education is valuable. And I feel like it sits back on us. So the people who are in the startup world who are looking at communities around EdTech to then leverage that interest and say, oh, if these parents are actually interested in their children learning, how do we make it possible for that to happen with the work that we are doing? Because that is the bottom line. The bottom line is to get these stakeholders engaged. And we already know that they have such a big buy in education, because education is still very crucial for the improvement of lives on our continent. There's so many people who are able to access better lives because they're able to access good education, good quality and relevant education to them. And so for me, I think the conversation comes back to leveraging the interest in education, the buy-in in education that our parents, teachers have, our communities have, and use that to our benefit to improve learning.
I like that. Abdallah, briefly.
We have to advocate for solutions and startups that really create impact in terms of the difference between adoption and non-adoption of EdTech, so that we could help push the narrative of EdTech as a key player in terms of education improvement. The most important thing to any educator or institution is to see education improvement and advancement of learning goals. And we should encourage more startups to kind of push for solutions that uphold this. At a higher level, we need to continue the discussion and involve in more and more EdTech startups, and also not leaving alone junior developers, because these are fresh from IT schools and have a lot of ideas, and involving them into this discussion could help spark up their brains and create new solutions in education.
Great. Dan, I'm giving you the last word.
We need to change the mindset of the parents and the policymakers. If you look at the way an African child gets access to a smartphone or a laptop or any other gadget, there is always this tendency on the side of parents and the adults that, you're still young, you're about to use this gadget, you need to, complete high school so that you can have access to the gadget. We need to bring down EdTech to transform the mindsets of these people on the African continent, that children as young as 5-year-old have the capacity to start using these tools and create new things. So we really need to put more energy into this. But on the side of the government, if I take a case of Rwanda is becoming an IT-driven country. The policies are there. So all we need is this mobilization, this mindset change sessions, transform these people and actually ensure that these kids have access to technology.
Thank you so much for joining us on this edition. Femi Adewumi, who is the Programs Director at MEST in Ghana, which is a technology hub. And we also did have Abdallah Sseruwagi, who is the EdTech Lab Lead at the Innovation Village in Uganda. And we did have Dan Ngabonziza, who is the Director at Kigali Today Radio in Rwanda. And joining us in studio as well, we did have Tesfaye, who is the founder and CEO of SHEGA in Ethiopia. And of course, right back home in Nairobi, we did have Oloo, who is the Programs Coordinator at EdTech East Africa here in Kenya. Thank you all so much for helping us close down what has been an amazing season of EdTech Mondays. And so from what the panelists have said, there is opportunity in emerging technologies such as generative AI and adaptive AI or artificial intelligence. And so the next season of EdTech Mondays is going to be a reimagined EdTech Mondays, where we will focus more on equity, inclusion and diversity, as well as policy implementation, and also the emerging technologies across the educational technology space across the continent, as we look forward to transforming the education ecosystem and improving access to quality and relevant education in Africa. My name is Joy Doreen Bira. Thank you all for joining us from Kenya's capital, Nairobi. Until the next season, bye-bye for now.
EdTech Mondays Africa is supported by the Mastercard Foundation's Center for Innovative Teaching and Learning and is part of the Mastercard Foundation's Young Africa Works programming.